Here's something Netflix does that drives me absolutely insane. It adds genuinely extraordinary films to its library. Best Picture winners, career best performances, films that critics have spent decades calling some of the finest ever made, and gives you nothing. No banner, no push notification, no just added row that actually means anything. You'd have to already know these films exist to go looking for them. I've done the digging. Today, 15 films, freshly added to Netflix, that deserve considerably more of your attention than they're getting. A washed-up baseball manager forced to take a women's team seriously for the first time in his life. A man who enlisted believing completely in his country, came home paralyzed, and found a country that had already stopped caring. And a war film built to feel like one unbroken breath, following two soldiers racing against a clock that could cost 1,600 lives. 15 films. Ranked. Let's go. Number 15. She Said. Let me start with a film that should have been a cultural event, and instead came and went almost silently.
Why is sexual harassment so pervasive and so hard to address? Let's interrogate the whole system.
Two New York Times journalists begin investigating decades of sexual abuse allegations against one of the most powerful men in the entertainment industry. Every source they approach is terrified. Every settlement was designed to make sure this story never got told. Carey Mulligan and Zoe Kazan play Megan Twohey and Jodi Kantor, whose reporting became the basis for the actual downfall of Harvey Weinstein and helped ignite the hashtag #MeToo movement globally. Maria Schrader directed this, and what makes She Said extraordinary is how deliberately undramatic it is. No shouting matches, no courtroom fireworks. Just two women making phone call after phone call, building trust one conversation at a time, turning years of silence into something that could finally be published and believed. Ashley Judd appears as herself, reliving her own real experience on camera. One of the most striking and unusual choices in the entire film. A film that deserved a much bigger conversation. Number 14. The Hurricane. Denzel Washington gives one of the finest performances of his career in this film, and somehow it's rarely mentioned in the same breath as his most celebrated work.
Carter is the slave name that was given to my forefathers and was passed on to me. Hurricane is the professional name that I acquired later on in life.
Washington plays Rubin Hurricane Carter, a real middleweight boxer wrongfully convicted of a triple murder in 1966, who spent nearly 2 decades in prison before a group of activists, including a young Canadian man who became convinced of his innocence, worked to overturn his conviction. Norman Jewison directed this, and the film moves between Carter's boxing career, his wrongful imprisonment, and the unlikely group of Canadians who took on his case for reasons that had nothing to do with obligation. The film never simplifies Carter into a saint. He is shown as a genuinely difficult, sometimes explosively angry man, shaped by a justice system that failed him repeatedly before it failed him catastrophically. And the film trusts you to hold both his anger and his innocence at the same time. Washington was nominated for the Oscar, and by broad consensus among critics, should have won it. His physical transformation for the boxing sequences and the sheer control of his performance during Carter's prison years remain some of the finest work of his career. Number 13. Old Henry.
Why'd you settle here? Up at dawn, working the crops, rain or shine.
You'll discover there's worse arrangements.
Tim Blake Nelson plays a quiet, unassuming farmer in 1906 Oklahoma, living alone with his teenage son on an isolated homestead, minding his own business, until he finds an injured man with a bag full of cash in his field. And shortly after, 3 armed men show up at his door, claiming to be lawmen looking for a wanted criminal. Potsy Ponciroli wrote and directed this, and what he built is one of the finest, most patient westerns of the last decade. A slow-burn thriller that spends its entire first hour convincing you it's a simple, familiar story, before delivering one of the most genuinely surprising reveals in recent genre cinema. Here's what I'll say without spoiling anything. The title of this film means something very specific by its final act, and once you understand what it means, the entire film recontextualizes itself completely. Every choice Henry makes, every line of quiet dialogue, suddenly carries a weight you didn't know it had. Tim Blake Nelson. usually cast in supporting or comedic roles, carries this entire film with a controlled, weathered gravity that makes the final revelation land like a gut punch. This film received almost no marketing and disappeared within weeks of release. It's one of the finest hidden gems in the modern Western genre. Number 12. A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. Tom Hanks plays Fred Rogers. That casting alone should have made this one of the most talked-about films of its year. Matthew Rhys plays Lloyd Vogel, a cynical, emotionally guarded journalist assigned to write a short profile piece on Mr. Rogers for a magazine issue about heroes, an assignment he considers beneath him. For a children's television host he assumes is exactly as saccharine in real life as he appears on screen. Marielle Heller directed this, and what she built is not really a biopic of Fred Rogers at all. It's a film about Lloyd, his estrangement from his father, his own buried anger, his complete inability to process difficult emotions in any healthy way, and how Fred Rogers, through nothing more than patient, genuine attention, slowly helps him do exactly that. Tom Hanks plays Rogers with an almost eerie calm and presence, never once suggesting that his kindness is a performance or a persona. It's simply who the man was, on camera and off. The film's willingness to sit in long, quiet silences, mirroring the actual pacing of Mr. Rogers' neighborhood itself, is a bold structural choice that pays off completely. Hanks was nominated for the Oscar for this. Genuinely moving, genuinely unusual in its structure, and one of the most quietly powerful films of 2019. Number 11. Born on the 4th of July. Tom Cruise gives, by wide consensus, the finest performance of his career in this film, and it's routinely left out of conversations about his best work.
I want you to help him.
Forgive us.
Help me! Somebody help me!
Based on the memoir of real-life Vietnam veteran Ron Kovic, the film follows Kovic from an idealistic, patriotic young man who enlists eagerly through the combat injury that leaves him paralyzed from the chest down, to his eventual transformation into one of the most prominent anti-war activists of his generation. Oliver Stone directed this, drawing on his own Vietnam experience, and the film is unflinching about the specific physical and psychological degradation Kovic experienced. The primitive, dehumanizing conditions of the veteran's hospital he's sent to, the anger, the alcoholism, the complete collapse of the identity he'd built his entire life around before he finds a new purpose. Cruise trained extensively with real paraplegic veterans to prepare, and the physical transformation across the film is genuinely remarkable. Cruise received an Academy Award nomination. Stone won Best Director. A ferocious, deeply personal piece of American filmmaking that remains one of the most powerful war aftermath films ever made. Number 10. A League of Their Own. Right, gear change. After all of that, here is one of the warmest, funniest, most purely enjoyable sports films ever made. During World War II, with most of America's professional male baseball players serving overseas, a group of women are recruited to play in the newly formed All-American Girls Professional Baseball League, a real historical league that existed from 1943 to 1954, largely forgotten by the time this film revived interest in it decades later. Penny Marshall directed this, and the ensemble she assembles, Geena Davis, Lori Petty, Rosie O'Donnell, Madonna, and Tom Hanks as their perpetually hungover, initially indifferent manager, generates the kind of easy, lived-in chemistry that makes a sports film work, regardless of whether you care about the sport itself. What elevates A League of Their Own beyond standard sports movie formula is its genuine interest in what these women were actually up against. A league that required them to attend charm school alongside batting practice. A country that saw their athletic ability as a novelty rather than a genuine achievement. And a sisterly rivalry between Davis and Petty's characters that gives the film real emotional stakes underneath the comedy. "There's no crying in baseball" remains one of cinema's most quoted lines for a reason. The film itself remains one of the great American sports comedies. Funny, moving, and genuinely important as a piece of largely forgotten sports history. Number 9. Hamnet. This is the newest film on this list, and it is already being called one of the most devastating films in years.
You touched me here. What did you see?
I saw a landscape.
Saw a landscape?
Spaces.
Jessie Buckley and Paul Mescal play Agnes and William Shakespeare, imagined here not through his plays or his fame, but through the death of their 11-year-old son Hamnet, and the grief that eventually reshaped itself into the writing of Hamlet. Chloé Zhao, the Oscar-winning director of Nomadland, directed this, and what she built is a film almost entirely uninterested in Shakespeare's public legacy. The first half of the film is a genuinely tender, sensory portrait of a marriage and a family, Agnes as a woman deeply connected to the natural world around her, Will as a restless young tutor who falls for her completely. Here's what makes Hamnet nearly unbearable in the best possible way. The loss, when it arrives, is filmed with a rawness that critics have described as some of the most shattering material put on screen in years. And the film's final act, the connection Zhao draws between private grief and the creation of one of the most famous plays ever written, arrives with a force that has reportedly left audiences in tears. Jessie Buckley's winning Best Actress at Oscar, and the young actor playing Hamnet himself gives one of the most remarkable child performances one can deliver. A genuinely devastating film about grief transformed into art, and one of the most acclaimed films of 2025. Number 8, Nomadland.
My mom says that you're homeless. Is that true?
No, I'm not homeless. I'm just houseless. Not the same thing, right?
No.
Frances McDormand plays Fern, a woman in her 60s who, after losing her husband and her livelihood when the company town she lived in collapsed following the 2008 recession, sells most of her possessions, buys a van, and joins a growing community of modern American nomads traveling the country for seasonal work. Chloé Zhao, the same director behind Hamnet, wrote and directed this, and cast real-life nomads alongside McDormand, blurring the line between documentary and fiction so completely that several scenes feel like they're capturing something genuinely unscripted. Here's what makes Nomadland one of the most quietly powerful films. It refuses to romanticize Fern's situation or treat it as pure tragedy. The nomadic community she joins is shown with real warmth, real dignity, and real hardship existing side by side. People who have built genuine meaning and connection out of circumstances that could easily be filmed as pure despair. McDormand won her 3rd Best Actress Oscar for this. Zhao became the first woman of color to win Best Director. The film itself won Best Picture. A quiet, meditative, deeply humane film about what's left after the American economy discards you, and what people build in its place. Number 7, Moneyball.
My job is to take this team to a championship. I need more money.
We're not New York. We're not going to compete with a $120 million payroll.
We got to think differently.
Brad Pitt plays Billy Beane, the general manager of the Oakland Athletics, a small-market baseball team with one of the lowest payrolls in the league, who partners with a young Yale economics graduate to build a competitive team using statistical analysis, rather than the traditional scouting instincts that had governed baseball for a century. Bennett Miller directed Moneyball, and Aaron Sorkin's screenplay, adapted from Michael Lewis's book, gives the film a rhythm and wit that makes a story fundamentally about spreadsheets and statistics genuinely gripping. Brad Pitt plays Beane with a controlled restlessness, a former player himself whose own failed promise as a can't-miss prospect informs every risk he's willing to take on players nobody else wants. Jonah Hill plays Peter Brand, the analytics-minded assistant GM, with a nervous intelligence that provides both comic relief and the film's intellectual backbone. The two of them building scene by scene an argument about how thoroughly conventional wisdom can be wrong when nobody bothers to check the actual numbers. What makes Moneyball more than a numbers movie is its emotional undercurrent. Beane's relationship with his daughter, his own unresolved feelings about a baseball career that never fulfilled its promise, and the specific loneliness of being right about something that the entire sport is furious at you for proving. 6 Academy Award nominations. One of the smartest, most purely enjoyable sports dramas of the 2000s. Number 6, Donnie Brasco. FBI agent Joseph Pistone spent 6 years undercover inside the Bonanno crime family, using the identity Donnie Brasco, an operation so successful and so dangerous that it remains one of the most significant infiltrations of organized crime in FBI history. Mike Newell directed Donnie Brasco, and what elevates it above a standard undercover thriller is its patience with the relationship at its center, between Pistone, played by Johnny Depp, and Lefty Ruggiero, the aging, low-level mobster played by Al Pacino, who vouches for him. mentors him, and comes to consider him something close to the son he never had. Pacino gives one of the most quietly devastating performances of his career, overshadowed always by his louder, more iconic gangster roles. Depp's performance charts Donnie's slow psychological merger with his own alias, a man who starts to prefer his fake life to his real one, with a specificity that most undercover thrillers never bother to explore. What makes Donnie Brasco extraordinary is its refusal to romanticize the mafia the way so many films in this genre do. Lefty is tired, underpaid, overlooked, and the agent infiltrating his life knows exactly what's going to happen to him once the operation concludes. Based on a true story that inspired countless subsequent undercover dramas, one of the finest, most emotionally complex mob films of its decade. Number 5. The Guns of Navarone. A team of Allied commandos is sent on a near impossible mission during World War II. Infiltrate a heavily fortified Greek island and destroy 2 massive German guns capable of sinking any ship that attempts to rescue 2,000 stranded British soldiers. J. Lee Thompson directed The Guns of Navarone from Alistair MacLean's novel, and what remains striking, over 60 years later, is how thoroughly the film's practical, large-scale filmmaking holds up. Gregory Peck, David Niven, and Anthony Quinn lead a team whose internal tensions, professional disagreements, buried resentments, differing philosophies about what the mission's cost in human life should be allowed to be, give the film genuine dramatic weight alongside its considerable action set pieces. This was one of the biggest box office successes of its era, nominated for 7 Academy Awards, and remains one of the finest examples of the large-scale World War II ensemble mission film, a genre that Guns of Navarone essentially defined, and that countless subsequent films, from The Dirty Dozen to Inglourious Bastards, would draw from directly. The climbing sequence up the island's sheer cliff face, achieved with minimal special effects and genuine physical risk, remains a masterclass in practical tension building, a genuine classic of large-scale adventure filmmaking. Still thrilling, still remarkably well-constructed. Number 4. Memento. Christopher Nolan made this for $9 million. It is, in terms of structural ambition matched by structural execution, the finest film he has ever made.
You don't remember where you've been or what you've just done.
I can't make new memories. Everything just fades.
What's the last thing you do remember?
My wife.
That's sweet.
Dying.
Leonard Shelby cannot form new memories, a condition resulting from an attack that also killed his wife. He wakes up every day knowing only what he has tattooed on his body and written on Polaroid photographs. He is trying to find his wife's killer. The film runs backwards. Each scene ends where the previous one began, so that you, the viewer, are experiencing the story with the same disorientation Leonard experiences daily. You know what he knows at exactly the moment he knows it. No more. Here's what makes Memento not just a formal exercise, but a genuinely great film. The structural conceit is not a trick. It's the argument. The film is about memory as the foundation of identity, and about what happens when that foundation is gone, about whether you can trust your own conclusions when every conclusion is built on a record you might have falsified, about the specific, terrifying question of whether Leonard is hunting his wife's killer or whether he's become something else entirely without knowing it. The final scene is one of the most devastating reveals in cinema, not because it's a twist, because of what it means. One of the most influential structural experiments in modern cinema, still endlessly rewatchable decades later. Number 3. Fargo. The Coen brothers directed this, and it remains one of the finest films they've ever made. A pitch-black crime comedy set against the flat, snow-covered landscape of Minnesota and North Dakota. William H. Macy plays Jerry Lundegaard, a car salesman in genuine financial desperation, who hires 2 criminals to kidnap his own wife, planning to split the ransom his wealthy father-in-law will pay, in a scheme that goes catastrophically, violently wrong almost immediately. Frances McDormand plays Marge Gunderson, a heavily pregnant, endlessly polite, and quietly brilliant local police chief investigating the resulting bodies. McDormand won the Oscar for this, the first of her 3, and her performance remains one of the most purely likable, morally grounded protagonists in the Coens' entire filmography. William H. Macy plays the car salesman with a flop-swept desperation that becomes, scene by scene, genuinely uncomfortable to watch. Here's what makes Fargo one of the greatest films of the 1990s. The Coens hold two tones simultaneously without ever letting either one undercut the other. The genuine, escalating brutality of the crime and the deadpan, almost absurdist comedy of the Minnesota nice culture surrounding it. The wood chipper scene has become one of the most referenced moments in American film history. The film that spawned it remains a masterpiece of tonal control, funny and horrifying in the exact same breath, over and over for 98 minutes. Number 2, Gone Girl. David Fincher directed this adaptation of Gillian Flynn's novel, and it remains one of the most perfectly constructed mystery thrillers of the 2000s. A film that completely rewrites its own moral terms exactly halfway through its runtime.
Nick Dunn, you're probably the most hated man in America right now. Did you kill your wife, Nick?
Ben Affleck plays Nick Dunn, whose wife Amy, played by Rosamund Pike, disappears on the morning of their 5th wedding anniversary, under circumstances that increasingly implicate him. The media, the police, and eventually the entire country turn against him as the case builds toward what looks like an inevitable conviction. I am not going to tell you what happens at the film's midpoint. If you know, you know. And if you don't, protect that information at all costs. Here's what I'll say instead. Rosamund Pike gives a career-defining performance as Amy, and the film uses its central mystery to say something genuinely sharp and uncomfortable about media manipulation, the performance of marriage, and the specific, curated persona everyone constructs for the people around them. Fincher's direction is cold, precise, and completely controlled. Every scene calibrated to keep you exactly one step behind what's actually happening. One of the finest thrillers of the decade. If somehow you've missed it, right now it's on Netflix. Go and watch it tonight. Number 1, 1917. Sam Mendes directed this, and it remains one of the most extraordinary technical achievements in the history of cinema.
You have a brother in the 2nd Battalion.
Yes, sir.
They're walking into a trap. Your orders are to deliver a message, calling off tomorrow morning's attack.
A First World War film shot and edited to appear as a single, continuous, unbroken take, following 2 young British soldiers across no man's land carrying a message that could save 1,600 lives, if they can deliver it in time. George McKay and Dean Charles Chapman play the 2 soldiers, and the film's single-shot illusion, actually assembled from long, meticulously choreographed takes seamlessly stitched together, was achieved through months of rehearsal, precise timing, and a level of logistical planning that cinematographer Roger Deakins has described as unlike anything he'd attempted before. Here's what makes 1917 more than a technical showcase. The unbroken structure isn't a gimmick. It puts you inside the specific, unrelenting dread of the mission in real time. No cutaways, no relief, no editorial distance from the constant possibility of death arriving from any direction at any moment. Roger Deakins won the Oscar for Best Cinematography. The film won Best Picture at the BAFTAs and was nominated for 10 Academy Awards. The trench sequences, the flooded ruins, the extended night sequence lit almost entirely by flares, every one of them remains genuinely astonishing years later. This is not just the best film on this list, it's one of the most technically extraordinary war films ever made, sitting quietly in a Netflix catalog most people scroll straight past. If you watch only one film from this list, watch this. That's the end of today's list. 15 films. All of them genuinely excellent. All of them barely part of the conversation. Now, I want to hear from you. Which one are you planning to watch tonight? And which one was your favorite from this list? If there's a specific type of movie recommendation you'd like to see next, let me know in the comments. I read them all, and your suggestion might inspire my next video. And if you genuinely like the video, please like, subscribe, and swipe left on the comments and hype this video. It really helps a small channel like mine grow. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.